welcome back to Beginning Quilting with Maddie. I'm Angelique, and today we're going to be working on Maddie's second block, which is the Old Windmill. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about your last block, how that went, because I sent you home with some homework. I know that when we were doing that block, you learned a little bit about the importance of seam allowance, trying to maintain that consistency. So if you just talk a little bit about that.
I sure did. I think I took something away about accuracy in general. Because it sort of has like this cascading effect where like, oh, if you do your cut and you're like, oh, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And then you move along and then you do your stitch and you're like, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. At some point in the process, that will catch up with you.
So even if you're off like an eighth of an inch, you know, if you're off an eighth of an inch in your cut and then you're off an eighth of an inch in your sewing, that's a quarter of an inch. That's a seam allowance. So they can be, it can definitely get you at the end when you start to add all your pieces together when you're trying to get to a particular size. Exactly. So it's one of the reasons why I tend to, when I'm cutting something, cut it a scant bigger, because you can always cut away. You can't add. It's a lot harder to add material. Usually you have to start over. So yeah, that's good. And you learned a little bit more about how to kind of read the lines on the plate and what you were lining up on. So that's really good. Well, I did send you home with some homework. Let's take a look at where you are in that process.
Well, we've got all of these broken dish blocks finished.
Nice.
And I think that for the most part, they came out well. Like I was saying, not all of them are 100% perfect as far as accuracy goes, which I think is fair because,
well, like I had, we had looked at these the other day, and I kind of noticed you had a little bit of a fold there. Yeah. But it looks really good. And some things, believe it or not, and I am the queen of fixing mistakes, you can fix it during quilting. Yeah. So there's ways to kind of get around. Sometimes, your fabric stretches out of place a little bit, and you have what you have. I mean, like yesterday, I started a project, and I was using some fat quarters, and I was like, oh, I'm going to need a lot more than I have. And I go to the quilt store and guess what? Sold out. So I had to kind of change my thoughts. So sometimes you just kind of have to make do with what you have. Yeah. And so there are ways to kind of fix that. And you can't really tell. And like I said, it will fix out nicely when we go to do the quilting. So great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Your next block is the Old Windmill. So this is an example large one of that. The Old Windmill is very similar to a traditional pinwheel, only your traditional pinwheel would have another solid half triangle here. This differs in that we are replacing one of the half square triangles with 2 quarter triangles to make that up. And we're also being very specific in where we are putting the particular colors. Yeah. What you generally do is you take your fabric and you place it right sides together like this, and then you'd sew your quarter of an inch all the way around like the shape of the box here. Okay. And then what you would do is you would cut on the diagonal this way, and you would cut on the diagonal this way, and you would get 4 quarter square triangles. When you unfold them, you end up with things that look like this. Right. The reason we're not doing this, and we're going to do one at a time, because last time, you remember when we did half square triangles, we did the 2 at a time method, and that won't work for this either. One is because we have some odd number blocks, and 2, again, has to do with the specificity of where we're laying this. So for this example here, just pretend I have the solid ones. Right. So you can see these aren't sewn together, but I want all of the same color in the center part of that block, and then my alternate color out here, and then I have my solid colors. If I do the 4 at a time method, look what happens. Trying to maintain the shape. Do you see what happens? Yeah. Right? So I'm not going to get the colors exactly where I want them. Because when you're cutting at the diagonal, it's actually flipping the direction of the other half square. So that's one of the things that are going to be different about that. All right, so this is called the Old Windmill. The first time it was published without a name was in a magazine in 1904 called Farm and Fireside. It's a great block. It can add a lot of pizzazz to something, and it just gives that little bit more than your traditional windmill. So we did prepare a few things in advance. So we have the larger squares here, which we cut at 7 3/4.
Yeah.
And then the smaller squares here that we cut at 7 1/4 for those things.
And I'm happy to report, I think my accuracy is improving.
And your speed. You got a lot more comfortable with
faster.
it. Right. So those are the different sizes that you're going to need. There'll be more details of exactly how many that you need in a deliverable that you'll find in a link underneath the comments of this video, so you know how many of each color, but that's what we needed. So for the half shape that we're going to be doing, that's going to make up our full half triangle that makes up our half square triangle part, we cut just once along the diagonal. With your fabric, I wasn't too worried about fussy cutting. Do you know what fussy cutting is?
I don't.
Okay, so fussy cutting is really kind of thinking about the shapes that you have, and are there parts of the pattern or directionality of the fabric that you really care when you put the thing together.
This is something I was thinking about when I was putting together the broken dish block. There were a few moments where I was like, oh, maybe I should have arranged this differently, but I like how it came out.
So sometimes if you do decide you want to do something that's got one directional fabric, maybe it's got characters on it and you just really don't like that the characters are upside down or something, then you are going to want a fussy cut, and you're probably going to need more material.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, if I cut this in half, and I'm going to use this in one place, I may not be able to use this other one in the side that I need it to be on. So that is something to consider if you do want a fussy cut, that make sure you do kind of double up on some of that material.
Yeah.
And then think about what can you use your other halves for if you can't use it for that project. So, but it can be beautiful. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I've got some things that I've absolutely fussy cutted because it was important to me, and other things not so much. So I am going to cheat, and I'm going to do 2 at a time. But if you are new to the process, I would recommend that you do 1 at a time. So I stacked mine together very carefully. Remember I said I like to cut them a scant bigger? That's part of why. So I'm gonna line from point to point, like the corner of that, and then I'm just going to hold it very secure and cut that. And now I have 4. And I'll just set those to the side and have you cut yours.
I think that looks good.
And one of the nice things about our ruler system is that, you know, having that guide is going to hold you right up against the sides, so you're going to get a good cut as long as you don't move the ruler. And your ruler has true grips on it, so you probably found it was really tight. I still need to put true grips on this one. I just keep forgetting it. Oh, that's great. Perfect. Looks good.
On to number 2. Starts to get satisfying once I feel like I'm getting it to come out how I want it to. And you guys probably can tell that I've gotten more comfortable with how much pressure to put on the cutter, which is nice. And there we go.
All right. All right, so next we're going to do the ones that are going to make up our quarter triangles that make up our half square. Do you have a preference for which one you'd like to cut?
Ooh, let's do this one.
You want to cut that one? Okay, I thought you might.
I haven't played with it yet.
So same concept. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stack them. Okay. Only this time what I like to do is I like to do it on a diagonal, so I don't have to move my fabric as much. Right, because I'm going to cut this way and then I'm going to cut this way.
Okay.
So I'm going to start by lining up just like I did last time. Okay. And then if I do move it a little bit, that's okay. It's just when I turn it, because I've got it stacked, they might get a little cattywampus, you know, like napkins.
Yeah.
And I don't want that to happen. So then I can line up my next 2. If I do need to make any little adjustments, I can. Hold that down and then come across the side here.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that's going to get me my cuts.
Perfect.
So try yours 1 at a time, see if that method works for you.
Yes. There's 1. Oh. Well, now I've moved it. So it was so automatic. I was like, I need to examine it. If I'm doing it this way.
So
would
if
I
you're
just
doing
line
it this
up on the
way,
map?
no, you want to line it up with your ruler.
That makes sense.
So make sure that you've got a straight edge to the
yeah.
center so you have that 90 degrees. So that's the other thing when you don't have points to point, you've really got to think about
So
you
true.
want that to be straight.
Okay. I think we've got it in a good spot. All right. Here. All right, one more. This time I'll try to remember to do it without moving it. Okay.
And then just carefully pick the ruler up. There you go. There you go.
We did it.
Okay, so next I'm gonna grab my iPad because we need to take a look at your block since we were very specific about their range.
Yes, okay, sounds good.
All right, so I pulled up the pictures on my iPad so that we make sure that we align them the way that you wanted from our design. So as you can see, you're gonna do the one with the orange because there's more blocks. And I'm gonna do the one with the two. So we want to mimic our pattern that we see here, and that's what we're gonna use our design boards for, okay? So let's just follow this.
Yeah. I'm gonna start big.
And we're gonna have a little overlap because these are only 12, and when our final block is 12 and a half,
Yeah, that's
that is
okay.
going to
It'll
give
do the
us,
job.
yep.
And hey, even though I have to do more blocks, you have to do blocks with those ones that I cut poorly, so it all balances out.
You got me. I'm gonna have a little bit of overlap, which is fine. I just want to get the general so that I remember where things go.
Yeah.
Now they're technically going to be all the same in the way that we do it, but this just really helps me visualize because I tell you, once I do something like this, and if I don't like pin or like clip it and I walk over to my machine, I will twist it around. And I don't know why, I just get it backwards once I get there. So this just really helps me visualize and make sure that I'm doing what I actually want to do.
I was definitely experiencing a little of that with my broken dishes.
Some people are better at that than others, and you know, kind of keeping it together, but not me. See, like, you know, this is why I do it, because this isn't right.
Yep.
And then once I get the first set on, it's so much easier to do the second set.
Oh, I see, you're layering.
Yeah, we're gonna do all, we're
That
just gonna
makes
put them all
sense.
together.
I was like, there, I did one, I'm finished.
I was like, oh, that's why she's done so fast. Let's take a look at our triangle shape. These are all right triangles, right? So here would be the 90-degree angle, here would be the 90-degree angle. So the legs of the triangles for the quarter square triangles are getting sewn together, right? So you have the two 90s here, and the hypotenuse of the triangles are what are going to make the other half of the square shape of the block.
Right.
So that the other two legs that come together become the hypotenuse that gets sewn on this one.
That makes sense.
So again, we would just want to think about how we want to sew these. So I'm going to flip this way.
Okay.
And if you'll pass those pins over here, or clips over here in the center, and I'm going to pin the side or clip the side that I want to sew. And I'm only going to clip that side. And that's going to help me remember when my dumb brain gets over to the machine to not, like, which of these legs do I sew? Because it will make a difference.
Right.
So like I said, they'll all end up the same. It's just that when I twist them, laying them out, I get mixed up. So that's why I like to lay them out. It just helps me for sure know that I'm not gonna have to unpick.
Yup. Makes sense to me, having done some unpicking myself.
I don't really need these white ones yet, so I just laid them out so I would be able to make sure I had my pattern. So I'm gonna set those to the side so they're not in my way when I carry all my triangles over.
Okay.
So I'm gonna move mine, grab my chair, and then I'll meet you at your machine, okay?
Sounds good.
All right, we have our quarter square triangles now, and we've got them pinned or clipped on the side that we wanna sew. So the next thing is, whenever possible, we wanna avoid sewing where we have a point. It's not always possible, in this case it is. And the reason for that is, it doesn't matter what machine you have, every once in a while it's going to want to eat that point because it's not perfectly straight. So we're starting with a leader like we did last time, and then you can just kind of adjust those corners. Don't take them both off so you don't forget. And you want to sew starting at the flat end.
Okay.
Right?
All right. We want our 1/4 inch,
Quarter inch.
which is not a 1/4 plus 1/8 inch.
Right, and it's the edge of this part of
Yes.
the foot.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're going to do like we did last time, we're going to chain stitch.
Okay. Do I need to lift the foot? Would you lift the foot for this, or would you just kind of?
Hopefully you shouldn't have to, but sometimes you do
Okay.
to get it to feed.
There we go.
If it doesn't feed,
Oh,
yeah.
it's going.
Yeah.
We got it.
And so you'll sew out a little bit and you'll do the next one.
Okay.
All right, feel good about that?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna go work on mine and then we'll reconvene here in the center.
Deal.
All right, so do you remember what we do after we sew something?
We press.
We press. So we're gonna go over to the iron and we're gonna press. And you know, remember it's always to the dark side. With these particular ones, I don't think it's gonna make a difference because they're pretty close. So just make sure whichever side you decide to press on, you do them all the same.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so the next thing is go ahead and lay out your half
yes.
triangles.
These ones too.
And we're just gonna start with the one so we know what to do here. And we can also do chain stitching with this, which we kind of will anyway, because we have the 4.
Right.
So now we want to flip over, because you'll notice they should come out to be about the same size.
Yeah,
but if
pretty
one's a
close.
little bit larger than the other, it's gonna be very important that it's centered. So we want to, when we flip this over, make sure our corners line up,
Okay.
okay? And we're gonna clip on the side here
Yeah.
that we're sewing. And remember, right sides together. And, you know, like sometimes it's hard to tell, so it's like I gotta look.
That one
and then,
was tricky for
yeah.
sure.
That's where some good lighting helps. Like our luminous lights will really help you be able to see if you've got that little bit of shine from the shape or the print on the fabric.
Okay.
So now like this one, because is a little shorter. So I still want to line this up as best as possible, but this is the edge that I would trim.
Okay.
So I made sure that this was flush, but that my points still lined up.
Okay.
And again, they should all be the same when you're done.
I think they are.
All right, let's go over to your machine.
All right.
All right, can you tell me what's different about the way we're gonna sew this block looking at it from what I told you in the last block?
Well, for one thing, we're going to have to start with a corner.
Yeah, there's no way to get out of the corner, right? So like I mentioned, you know, it doesn't matter what machine you have, sometimes it's just gonna eat the corner, it gets hungry.
Yeah.
So there are some things that you can do to kind of help your machine not eat your corner. One is make sure you have a new needle. So I changed the needles. So with the Little Rebel, our plate already comes with a single hole.
Okay.
Most domestic machines will have a more oval hole because you can move. Since this is a straight stitch machine, it doesn't. But the other ones will have that because you can move the location of your needle, or some of the stitches, like a zigzag or something like that will do that. So ours come with just kind of the single hole that's there. Other machines, you can switch out the plate for a single hole. There's been suggestions like you could put a little tape over those so that it's only going through one place. So that's one of the things that you can do as well. I'm going to go ahead and snap this back on here. leaders, right? So we've talked about the importance of using leaders and chain stitching, right? Because that will help kind of keep the machine going, opposed to when you've got all the threads and everything getting tangled up, right, when you get started. So that's one of the things you can do. You also want to make sure you're using the right kind of needle for the material. So since we're piecing and this is cotton, it's a little soft, we are using the 90-14 size needle for that. So that's some of the things that you can do. I recently learned a new technique and I wanted to kind of share it as well. If you've done all those things and for some reason the quilt gods are against you and it's still being kind of a pain, you can start with some paper.
Oh.
So paper is great for a lot of different things when you're sewing. If you have something that tends to like want to stick to the plate here and it doesn't want to go smooth, you can start with some paper. And so you can get it started a little bit so that you're there, and then line up the corner that you're starting on.
On top of the paper?
On top of the paper. Remember, the paper isn't on the right edge. Still pay attention to your seam allowance, and you can, it's just gonna help it not go in the hole because it can't get to the hole now. So I thought this was brilliant, so I wanted to share it. Another thing is you could start, instead of starting on the edge here, maybe start in a little bit, but I think this really kind of saves you from having to have a part of your seam that isn't finished, which sometimes you do want that for certain techniques, but not for this one. I'm gonna finish this one so I can show you when you're done. And again, from this point on, you could just chain stitch, but even sometimes when I chain stitch, every once in a while the machine is hungry and it's still gonna take that corner. Go slow. That way, if it isn't going through, you don't just keep, because then you get a knot of thread in there that you have to try to unpick, and it makes it a little bit hard to deal with as well. And you can distort your corner. And so when you're done, your paper will just tear off.
Nice.
Okay.
That's cool.
So those are just some ideas to kind of help when you are forced to do a corner like we are here.
Yeah.
So you got 3 more. I'll go finish mine and then we can do our next part of the assembly.
Okay. All right, all done.
All right, what'd you think of the paper method?
It was super cool. I liked how it created the perforation and it just ripped off so easy.
Yeah, it's just a good idea to make sure you think about what side you rip so you don't end up ripping your stitches out. So, that can be helpful. There's nothing like having to resew.
Yes.
All right, so next you're gonna press. You want to press. Now this is gonna create a little bit more bulk, but since we are using such a light triangle here, you wanna press the light to the dark side.
Okay.
Okay? So go ahead and go press, and then we're ready to start thinking about final assembly. So this is a good time for us to check the size of the blocks that we have so far and possibly do some trimming, because remember I cut it a little bit bigger.
Right.
So remember our final block size is gonna be 12 and a half, right? To get 12 and a half, what size blocks would we need lined up against each other?
6 1/4.
Right, so, but to get 6 1/4, we would need a 1/4 inch seam allowance.
Right.
So we would cut our blocks to 6 1/2.
Okay.
Okay. And so looking at this, it's a little bit big, right? Mine's is closer to 6 3/4. So what I'm gonna do is, you see this diagonal here?
Yeah.
And I have the diagonal here. So that's gonna help me line that up. So I'm that part of it, okay? Now the next thing I wanna think about is this line here.
Okay.
Right? So if I want my full block to be 6 1/2, then my midpoint would be 3 1/4.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So I've got that lined up, and then I'm sliding so that my 1/4 and my 1/4 are going to be on that point where they come together. We see that?
Yeah.
All right. And so now I'm going to trim any excess and double check. And I have to do that on both sides.
Okay.
So now the bottom here should line up at 6 1/2. My straight side here that I cut should line up in 6 1/2. I still have this here. I can see I still got to my 1/4. All right, so now I'm gonna have some good sized blocks here.
Okay, awesome.
All right, I have another one, I'll go grab it. You go ahead and work on yours.
Alrighty.
So same concept as last time. We can go this way, we can go this way, doesn't matter, but just we're gonna put two together. So I'm gonna go vertical first. All right, make sure that your corners are lined up. We're gonna be nesting again, right? But we're nesting on the diagonal.
Okay.
And since we did pre-trim our squares here, be very careful that seam allowance that you stay in the quarter.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna sew along those lines and meet back here. And then do a little bit of pressing again.
All right.
So we're gonna lay them back out again.
Let's see here.
Looking good.
Yeah.
One of the ways you can tell is it looks like you got about a quarter of an inch here.
Yeah.
So that should tuck in nicely. All right, so remember with this one, so I want to make sure that one side is folded one way. So I'm just going to finger press it, and then I want the other one folded the opposite direction. So when I flip it, then this seam needs to be going the other side.
Okay.
Right? And I'm going to nest those little corners in there. Should feel flat.
Yep.
I always clip that one first. And then clip everything else. When you hit that seam, I gave you one of these so that it can kind of help you hold it in place and hold down that thicker seam as you go through.
Okay. Okay.
We gotta pop our seam and go press. So it's gonna.
Not my forte.
It doesn't always work perfectly for me either. Sometimes you literally have to break some thread and you just get that little pinwheel.
Yeah.
Kind of in the center there, and then we're just gonna go press that.
Mine's a little smushier than yours.
It's okay. It's just gonna help flatten it. It doesn't have to be perfect, just enough that it'll help when we do our quilting later. Are you ready to reveal?
So ready.
All right, let's do it. Oh, your points came out good.
What?
Look at
We
that.
did it.
Woo! Let's check our size.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. Your turn.
I was just so excited. I was like, wow, it's perfect. Okay. Mine's pretty close.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's
awesome.
That gives us, perfect. Yay,
We did it! This went so much better than the first block.
So what do you think of this block?
It's adorable. I love it. And I love that it came out a little cleaner this time.
Yeah, that's called practice.
That's called practice.
And guess what? You have
I have more practice to do.
Right? Because I only got one of mine done. So you've got 4 more blocks to put together. You're going to have a total of 3 of these and 2 of these.
Awesome.
Any questions about this process?
Oh, not right now, but I'm sure I'll think of something next time.
All right, and then we can talk about that when we get started for the next block.
Okay, sounds great.
What is your next block?
It's the Sawtooth Star.
It is the Sawtooth Star, and so that one you're going to build a new skill. So far we've just done some triangles. We did half square triangles in the last one. We added the quarter triangles that took up a half square for this one, but basically similar concept to some way or another made into half square triangles. And now we're going to do one that has triangles, but it's a totally different technique. You're going to learn how to do flying geese.
See, I've heard of flying geese.
Yeah. So flying geese, there's a couple methods for that. I'll see which one I think is going to work best for your particular thing. We will definitely do a very, very basic, so you understand how to put a basic flying geese together, and then we'll probably do at least the one with the square where you cut it off versus starting with triangles. So we'll do a couple of different ways because it will be useful depending on the next quilt that you do, because I think you're gonna be a lifer. Right, if you are quilting along with us, there will be a one sheet that shows you how to make our block of today, and you'll find that in the comments here below this video. If you are sewing along with us as well, we would love to see what your block looks like, and look forward to seeing you next time for the last block that we need to put together before we start assembling your rows. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.